dude. So stoked.
That was awesome. That's amazing.
Yes! Oh my God, so much relief.
What was the hardest part?
I started cramping from quite early, but I managed them pretty well. First cramp was it. Oh, sorry. I felt really sick. Honestly, I probably overfueled then. Lucky my stomach was fine, but at the end I almost felt like I had a bit of a sugar overload, which is not a bad thing.
Were you confident you were going to make it?
I'm so happy with that. I mean,
did you feel confident the whole time?
I had a really good pack to work with until about 17 miles, so 26, 27K, and then we all split apart. And from about, my first cramp I think was at about 28.5, 29K, 18 miles. And they sort of went on and off the rest of the final, 8 miles. And there was a period around 34K, 21.5 miles where they got pretty bad and I was starting to worry a little bit. But I just sort of kept correcting stride a little bit, and I think I said before, in the last mile, I saw the clock with 1 mile to go at 2:14.10, and I was like, I need a 5:50 to go under it. But I felt good otherwise, like aerobically, I felt actually pretty good. Like, my muscles were, cramping a bit. But in the last mile, I pushed the pace a bit and literally was just running with my fingers crossed, just being like, just don't cramp. Just don't cramp, because I felt good, and I ran, what was it, 5:20 I think, or maybe 5:19 last mile. So 2:19.30, so stoked.
Yeah, finally under the 2 hour 20 mark, which has been a long time coming. When I ran 2:20, it was in November 2021, so almost 3 full years ago. And even on that day, I was trying to break 2:20, even though my best before that run was 2:24. I guess some of the training leading into that indicated that it was possible to run under 2:20. And then it's been, I think, 9 attempts, as they were all between 2:21 and 2:24. And yeah, awesome to finally get under it. So I guess I'll start by saying we were so busy, Reem behind the camera, who, might I quickly point out, ran a 6-minute personal best yesterday. 7 minutes, almost 7 minutes. Sub 3:20, 3:19.53. We were so busy between the wedding last week, of which you can probably see a lot of the stuff in the background still in our house, and this week, that I didn't really organise for anyone to do any videoing of race day. So we don't have a lot of footage, so it'll mostly be me speaking, but I have put on my Instagram story earlier today, if anyone has footage, to put it into the Google Drive folder. So I'll be uploading the footage after I film the intro. But yeah, apologies for not having a lot of footage from the race itself, but of course I'll give you a quick 15 to 20 minute sort of breakdown as to how it all went. But yeah, I mean, we knew the day before the conditions were going to be what they were. Forecast in Chicago was all over the place leading into the race. 10 days before, it looked like it was going to be close to 20 degrees Celsius or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Then that completely reversed, went down to being 6 degrees Celsius or 42 degrees Fahrenheit about 5 days out, and I was very excited for that. Yeah. I would say that would have been close to perfect. My perfect scenario would have been probably slightly even colder than that. But then it came back up and it sort of started at about 13, 14 degrees Celsius, high 50s Fahrenheit. But the thing that, I wouldn't say it worried me, but the thing that I knew we'd have to deal with would be the humidity, which started at, I think it was 87%, and it was over 80% the whole way. So, I wouldn't call those conditions bad, wouldn't call them good, but I do know a lot of people after the race struggled with the humidity and the heat, and I struggled a little bit with the heat and humidity too. But speaking, honestly off the top of my head, and people could take this in an arrogant way or whatnot, but I really don't mean it for it to be, but I think I'm in far better shape than what I ran yesterday, 2:19, and the conditions probably slowed me and most people down by a few minutes. Who knows how many minutes, between 1 and 3 or 1 and 4. Sarah Hall really struggled in the humidity, and a lot of others have mentioned that. But I'm just really glad that I was able to still get under the barrier and run 2:19.31. But turn up to the start area. We were a little bit delayed getting to the start area because the trains down the road from us took a long time. They were very infrequent, which I guess is sort of normal for the Chicago train system. But we got there at about 6:20, about an hour and 10 before, of which ended up being fine. The security line was very short when we got there, luckily. Last year when we got to the security area about an hour 20 before, it was very long, but this time it was... Seemed like they had a new system, a new, more efficient system, and it took us 1 minute to get through the security. Last year it was more like 30 minutes. Yeah. So I got to the American development tent an hour before, so loads of time. Did my warm-up, did a mile jog, felt great, felt normal, had finished my Monster Energy drink, and I guess rewind an hour and a half or 2 hours earlier, I had a big bowl of rice at home. And when we were lining up to go out to the start line with about 20 minutes to go, I spotted Matt Centrowitz because the elite, so I wasn't in the elite corral, I was in the American development, which is basically, if you don't know, it's just basically a group of people that's probably about 300 or maybe 200 to 300 people. And you start at the front and you get a really good warm-up area. You don't get the drinks at the tables or anything like that, but you do get sort of a bit of an advantage. You get a tent and there is a great warm-up area and there's many more toilets for us. I saw Matt Centrowitz. I asked him if he's still planning on going 5:16 mile pace, 3:15, 3:16 per kilometre, and he said the plan had changed to go 5:18 mile pace or about 3:18 per kilometre, which was perfect for me. That would have been 69:30 to 69:40. I guess they made the adjustment because of the humidity and the heat. I'm not sure. He didn't actually explain why. But when the gun went off, I immediately found him within 300 meters because he started just sort of 2 meters ahead of me, just to the side. Got onto him, and then I noticed pretty quickly, well, the first mile, it's under a tunnel and the GPS doesn't really work, so it's a little bit hard to know how fast you're going. But if you've been running a long time, you can normally tell if you're close to the mark. But I had a feeling in the first mile we were going a little bit too slow. It felt remarkably easy. And at the mile mark, we split, I think it was 5:27, which was almost 10 full seconds off what we were supposed to. But what I noticed was the women that were supposed to be up with Centrowitz, so that was Kira D'Amato, Emma Bates, I believe, and Sarah Hall, they were all there, but they were sort of hanging back from him a little bit, just 5 meters or so. And Centrowitz was sort of having glances back, and I guess he knew, having raced so many track races, that there's not a lot of point in the pace of being way ahead. So he was sort of gauging his pace and effort off what the women were doing, and they weren't really going with him. And after the first mile, I thought, okay, that's quite a bit slower than what we had planned. Strangely, on my Strava, it doesn't show that we had a first mile that was too slow. It showed that we were right on pace. But the mile marker on my watch was, I think it was 5:27. And then the next mile was 5:21. And I said to Centrowitz at that point, I said, is this the plan? Are we going a little bit slower than you thought? And he sort of said, yeah, they're just not coming with me. So I'm sort of slowing down a bit. And it was right around the 2 mile mark that I thought, okay, be a little bit wary here because we're on pace for like 2:22 at this point, or 2:21. And I don't want to be on that pace. I want to be definitely, a little bit quicker than that, at least 5:20s at this point. And so I just went at that point. I think it was around maybe just after the 2 mile mark. And luckily for me, about 5, actually I think at that point it was 6 guys came with me, including Brady Threlfall from Inside Running Podcast, fellow Australian, who I had a brief chat with on the start line. Was happy he came with me as well, and I was able to run most of the race with him, which was great. And there was about, I think it was 6 others, and we ran as a pack very well. We worked really well together all the way through until about 29k. But between the 2 mile mark, 3.2k, and 29k, I was able to get all the fuel down that I wanted to. I was grabbing cups off the course. I was taking in gels. And I saw my mum twice on the course, which was great, at the 4.7 mile mark and the 11 mile mark. And kind of uneventful, to be honest, between 2 miles and 18 miles. We had that pack of 6, all of us, we were sort of sharing the lead. I would say I was probably leading the most in that group. There was another guy who I'm not familiar with what his name was, but he was leading quite a bit. He was about my height. Didn't catch his name, but he was very helpful. We were sharing the lead for the most part, and there was also a nameless athlete, Nameless is a club here, who was running, and I think his name was Michael, but I'm not clear, but he was also leading a little bit as well. And everything sort of started to change around 18 miles, which was also the point in which I got my first cramp. It was actually about 29k, so that's about 18 and a half miles. And from there on, it was actually a little bit strange, and I'll explain why. I started cramping for the first time at 29k, and I remember that because I remember looking at my watch because I wanted to remember when it was. And it was right around 29.1, I think. So at the 29k mark, I had the first little cramp in my left hamstring. It wasn't very big at that point. But that was also right around the same time as our pack disintegrated. And pretty much everyone except Brady, Inside Running Podcast host, fell back. And so sort of all of a sudden I realized while I was sort of thinking a little bit about the cramps and sort of trying to plan through, well, there's not a lot you can do, but just sort of think through, I noticed very quickly that, the guys were dropping back. So must have been 18 and a half miles. Then I got a clear run for maybe 2 kilometers or so with no cramping. And then my Strava graph actually shows there's quite a big dip to pretty close to 4 minutes a kilometer or 7-minute mile pace. I think it's around 32K. I'll put it up on the screen, but I had one large one, which was quite concerning around, once again, it'll be on the screen right now, but I'm going to guess it was around 32K, around 20 miles.
How bad was it?
It was pretty bad, and it was the worst one I had. Luckily, they actually didn't get worse after that. But it was in my left hamstring. It locked right up. I had to slow down quite a bit, and I sort of quickly kicked my leg out and tried to stretch it out. Didn't have to stop, but I think my pace slowed to close to 4 minutes a kilometer or 6:30 a mile. And then after that, they sort of came and went. It sort of surged a little bit in my other hamstring at one point. But what's strange to me is that in my mind, I was thinking, I'm clearly affected by this. I think I'm slowing. But then that was my general feel, but then my vision was not slowing. And what I mean by that is I was passing people, no one was passing me. Brady looked good and stayed with me to about 34 kilometers, and then he dropped back a little bit, and then I saw him at the end. He ended up running quite well, 2:20:29, I believe it was. But we were running together to, I think it was 34, it might have been 34 and a half kilometers. But I got very lucky that in the last 1.5 to 2 miles, I think it was, everyone that's run a marathon knows that last 10K is a little bit fuzzy in your mind. You're sort of not clear exactly when things happen. But this episode is sponsored by Ketone IQ, a product that's taken the endurance world by storm over the last few years. I've been taking Ketone IQ for a little over a year, and I find it really useful for brain energy and also for recovery after hard workouts. Ketone IQ is used by many of the world's best athletes, including Sam Laidlow, Cameron Worth, and even Team Visma Lisa Bike. You can score 30% off by heading to the website ketone.com/sweatelite for 30% off at Ketone IQ. I think it was the last 3K, 2 miles. The cramping didn't affect me really at all, and I was able to sort of have a clear run home. And I knew the whole time in the last 10K that I was pretty, close to that barrier. I was just under the 2:20 pace, and at a mile to go, there was a sign saying 1 mile to go. Yeah. The clock said 2:14:11 just as I crossed it. And I knew, okay, well, if it was 2:14 flat, that would be a 6-minute mile. So it's a 5:49 mile. And my thought was this, I was like, I feel like I could run a 5-minute mile now if I wasn't cramping. That's honestly how good I felt at the time, which would have been a 3:07 kilometer pace to the end, which would have gotten me obviously, 2:19:11. But I was just thinking to myself, keep running conservatively, because I changed my technique a little bit in the last 10K to run with slightly straighter legs. At least I felt like that, because that's what I normally do when I'm cramping in my hamstrings. But I thought to myself, just don't kick hard here, because if you do and you have a crippling hamstring cramp, because many times these cramps stop me in my place and I'm not able to even move. That's happened multiple times to me in races. So I just was properly fingers crossed hoping that wouldn't happen, and it didn't. I got a clear run. And that little hill that you get between 600 meters to go and 300 meters to go, there's a little rise towards the end. That was very helpful for me, because anyone that has cramps knows that little rises and little falls actually help the cramps. They put you can probably understand why. It's almost like it alters the way that your stride is, which takes less pressure off the muscles that are doing all the work. And so I think my fastest pace in the whole race was up that hill, because I noticed that my hamstrings weren't contracting as much up that hill. So that was actually very helpful. And then when I turned the corner and saw the finish area 300 meters away roughly, I just had my fingers crossed, just going, just don't cramp here, because I knew at that point I was quite a bit under the barrier. So I guess a couple other points. Was so good to see Kevin Brannick, who's a good friend of ours, photographer, 2 miles to go. He was screaming at me, knowing that I was right on pace. And equally as inspiring was Peter Bromka with about 1.2 miles to go. I think he was at the 25 mile mark, 40 point something K. He went crazy when I went past him. Peter Bromka, one of the best writers in the game, 2:19 marathoner himself. He's run 2:19 quite a few times. He came right out onto the road And it kind of startled me a little bit, but he was like, don't look at your watch. Don't look at your watch. You're going to do it. Just focus on that. There was a person ahead of me. I'm not sure who it was, probably about 70 meters ahead of me at that point. He said, just focus on catching him. Just catch him and then you've got it. And he was like screaming at the top of his voice right up in my face. Like, we're not talking on the side of the road here. He came right out and was almost in front of me. I was like, are you going to tackle me or, or pick me up and carry me? That was really helpful. And yeah, I mean, I knew for sure I'd done it. I mean, for sure with 100 meters to go because my cramping hadn't struck me for 10 minutes at that point, maybe more. And just so much relief crossing the line, seeing 2:19, 28, 29, 30. I was just like, oh, finally. So yeah, that's the short version of it. I mean, there's not, too much more to report on other than that. I was throwing water over my head the whole way to cool down, which helped for sure. There was quite a bit of a breeze, which was very helpful. It wasn't like a powerful wind one way. It was just blustery and sort of breezy. Yeah. Didn't really slow us down, I don't think, but that was really helpful because when I was throwing water on my head and my skin, I was sort of getting cups of water thrown it on my head and all over my arms. And when the wind was hitting that part of my skin, it felt like it was cooling quite a lot. So yeah, the first thing Brady said to me at the end, and I can completely understand this, he said, he got warm towards the end and he'd actually done the whole build-up in Victoria, in Australia through the winter where he wouldn't have had to run in these conditions before, at least in the last 3 months. And so I think a lot of people were affected by that towards the end. And yeah, I definitely felt like I was affected by it, but I'm just, like I said, really glad to just get the mark on the board. Yeah.
So how would you say, obviously I have a ton of questions, but when it came to your fueling, would you say that was exactly on the mark? You took everything in. It was very helpful. Yep.
I took in about 100 grams of carbs an hour via the Gatorades and the Chargels that I had. I took 4 of them, which is 180 grams. So 4 times 45 grams. And I would have taken 5 cups of the Gatorade, which would have been close to another probably 50, 60 grams of carbs. So about 240 in total over 2 hours and 19 minutes. Fueling was pretty much perfect. I felt great at the end. In fact, when I crossed the line, it took about a minute to strike me and I actually felt quite sick. I actually almost vomited. And there's footage of that actually that I'll show you when I'm being interviewed by a friend, Lanty. And I almost felt like I had too much sugar in me. That's what it felt like. I don't know if that's what it was. Because it wasn't a feeling of exhaustion vomit. It was more like, oh my God, I've got so much sugar in my system. Fueling went well and pacing went well. Yeah, 109.39 at the half and 2:19.31 at the end. So pretty even split. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
What was the most memorable thing that you can remember from the course?
Probably Bromka, honestly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things, but that was just. I didn't look at my watch when he said that because just up the road from that was that 1 mile to go mark, and I knew at that point 5:49, and I knew that my pace had been 5:20, 5:23 for the last few miles. So I was like, I just need to hold this, and I'll go 2:19.30. That's what I thought, and then I did exactly what he said. I said, just focus on that person ahead of them, catch them, and I did, and finished, and that was it. So. Yeah, but there's so many memorable moments, but I'd say that's probably the standout one.
Yeah, Chicago was insane this year. So many people on the course.
Yeah.
And I remember you and I talking, like, I even thought to myself, like, a lot of the times I've heard you explain when the cramps really increase is when you're starting to pick it up a bit.
Yeah.
And when you want to pick it up. But I knew that if you just hold your pace consistently, you should be okay. Like, the cramps, they're going to come, but maybe they won't increase as much.
They were the worst. They were the worst for me between 31 and 35. That was kilometers. So what's that? 19 and a half miles and 22 and a half miles. That was when it was the worst. And then the last 3 miles, last 5K, it was not that bad at all. So got lucky there. Yeah. But when you're cramping like that, you're kind of running scared a little bit. You really can't properly, even though you could, but you really can't kick down hard because you just get this feeling inside you that if you do that, you're just going to have a massive cramp for some reason. And that might be wrong, but that's just the feeling you get. You're sort of running scared and conservatively. And yeah, that's how it felt a little bit in the last 10K. It was just about running, keeping the pace as consistent as I possibly could and just trying to make sure I wasn't slowing down. Yeah.
Well, I guess a big question for me would be, training wasn't really that different compared to the last few build-ups.
There was higher mileage.
Yes.
Quite a lot higher mileage.
Higher mileage.
Otherwise, it wasn't that much different. I mean, you could argue that it was to some extent because I did add in the hill sprints every week, which I'd never done before, and I think that was definitely helpful. I think that's definitely improved my speed. I mean, the 69:39 half was almost certainly the easiest half split I've ever done.
Okay.
And I would say the training has been a bit different. Higher mileage, the hill sprints. The workouts themselves probably weren't very much different.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was referencing.
But I do think, you know, and I know this is a touchy subject for many, and I say that all the time, and I maybe will give a warning right now. Maybe like if eating disorders or, you know, losing weight has been a trigger for you, maybe just don't listen to the next 30 seconds. So now's your time to skip ahead. I do think being lighter absolutely helps me. It doesn't help everyone. And I have spoken to quite a lot of people about this, and I've met people that have tried to lose kilos and pounds and it's backfired on them. That's actually absolutely true, and I know that, and I'm aware of that, and I know that it's a risk. But for me, you know, one of my good friends from Melbourne, Daniel Hart, he ran Melbourne Marathon the other day. He asked me what he thinks was the main reason how I was able to drop under 220, and I said, honestly, probably like 75% the weight and 25% the higher volume. That's my gut feeling. That's definitely the case for me. And I noticed that 3 years ago in Indianapolis when I was 70 kilos. Right now I'm just under 70 kilos, and I didn't do huge amounts of volume in that for that race and ran 220. Yeah, for me it's just it's a really simple. It's a very clear contributor for me, but you don't necessarily have to think that it's going to be the same for everyone. I know that's not true. So yeah.
So, you know, you mixed in a little bit of the gym, you've added the hill sprints,
Yep.
bigger mileage, and not forgetting that you did complete that, you know, speed section right before the build.
Yeah.
Would you say that was maybe the contributing factor for this?
They all contributed. They all contributed a little bit. Yeah, once again, I fundamentally believe, and I'm going to believe that until it's proven wrong or proven right, that I have a few more minutes up my sleeve on a much colder day. And in Indianapolis, in 4 weeks, I'm really hoping that it is much colder, closer to 0 degrees Celsius or 32 Fahrenheit, which is probably my ideal. I know that's crazy to most people. I think there's a few minutes up my sleeve there, and so it is a pretty big jump in fitness. It hasn't really shown at this point because, you know, I've only broken my best by just over a minute, which isn't a huge jump, but I can tell my fitness has really jumped a lot more than that. And I think they all contribute. They've all added up. The addition of gym, I have a feeling that's probably the smallest part of it, but it definitely has helped. I think the gym probably helped me manage the cramps a little bit better than normal. It definitely didn't get rid of them, but I think it just maybe helped me manage them. The diet and the sort of being lighter helped probably the most, and the volume helped quite a lot too. And probably another thing is just having a home and having you know, a consistent base without travel. That's helped too. So I think they're all adding up to being a pretty big difference. Yeah.
So how are you going to come back from Chicago, be refreshed for Indianapolis?
That's a good question. People ask me often how you should best recover from a marathon. And my opinion is you shouldn't plan it. You should actually basically take it almost day by day, because the execution of a marathon differs a lot depending on if you pace it well, if it's hot, if you negative split, if you positive split, if you blow up, if you have GI distress, all these things. And the recovery can be very different depending on how you race it. And so for me, I paced it evenly, didn't blow up, and I think that for me, it'll probably be a case of having 2 days completely off, 2 or 3 days of easy running, maybe 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and then maybe 90 minutes. And then I hope on Saturday or Sunday, I can do my first workout back, which will probably be at about 60, 70% volume. I'll probably do 6 or 7 by a mile at maybe marathon pace. And then I've got basically 2 weeks of training and then another little mini taper. But people often underestimate how much stimulus they get from the marathon itself, like a 2 hour, 19-minute tempo run, basically. So I don't have to exactly worry about, you know, doing a hard workout in the next few days. That's a big stimulus right there. So yeah, look, last year I did 4 marathons in 10 weeks, and I explained this in the last video. They weren't all great, but my last one was the best one, so I don't really have a hard time backing up. I did a half marathon in the middle of those ones too, and ran very close to my best. So yeah, answer is not an exact one there, but I think Saturday or Sunday I'll do another workout, and then I mean, this whole training block, I've coached myself through it, but I haven't planned too far ahead really ever. I'm often actually making up workouts the day before, but I know the rough template of the workout. I know it has to be threshold or marathon pace or somewhat. So yeah, but that's the vague idea. But I would imagine I would get in 2 long runs in between now and Indianapolis. I'll probably do one long one that's not very hard, a 40 or a 45K one that's sort of, a bit slower, and then one that's faster, probably close to marathon pace, and long, maybe 20 or 25K, 12 to 15 miles, something like that. And probably 1 or 2 more workouts that are shorter at threshold, 10 by 1K, something like that, or 25 400s. And the rest of it would be easy running. But I'll keep in the hill sprints. I'll keep doing the diet because I'm really keen to see what's possible. I truly believe what Kaizen is showing is possible, but it would have to be perfect. And of all people, now I've done 20 marathons, I know that finding perfect in a marathon is very hard. It's very difficult to do. So yeah, but I do think that if Indianapolis is 2 degrees, 1 degree, 0 degrees, 32 Fahrenheit that is, and there's people going for 215, 216, and I can actually be racing them, I think that's not impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully you will, because Indianapolis does draw in a few of that. You have to prepare yourself possibly of running solo.
Yeah.
For the race, and there's not much of a crowd, so that will be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
Going from Chicago to Indianapolis, but it's a great course, and the bonus for there is the second leg is there are some rises and some downs, so that would be good for any cramps that might come your way.
What helps me in Indianapolis, so I've run Indianapolis twice, ran 220 in 2021, and last year ran 222 and even paced it. The middle of the course between about, I can't remember exactly, maybe 24K and 33K, something like that. There's a section through the middle that has some rolling hills. They're not steep, but that's the part where I normally start cramping, towards the end of that phase. And I feel like those hills are in such a perfect time that they almost delay my cramps a little while. That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
They've done that both times. So I'm hoping that happens again. But if I can draw any parallels to my cramping, I've tried to think through so many reasons why these cramps happen. And the only for sure correlation that I've come up with at this point is that the colder it is, the less my cramps affect me. Well, then you would say, isn't it sweat loss and sodium loss? Well, you would assume so, but yesterday I consumed a lot of water. I guess I left out at the start, I actually consumed quite a lot of cups of water as well. So I did consume quite a lot of fluid. But yesterday I had a lot of sodium beforehand, and I had a couple of the tablets during as well. And yeah, it doesn't really help the sodium for me. So yeah, but I'm really excited for Indianapolis. And I almost feel like at this point, my lifetime goal, you would call it, my big goal of running 220 is done. So sort of the pressure's off, and now I can really see what's possible. Yeah, but thank you so much to everyone that's tuned in and followed the journey. It really means so much to me. I mean, when I woke up today and properly looked through my Strava comments and Instagram comments and even YouTube video, there was just almost thousands of you at this point, commenting and stuff, and it's so awesome. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to everyone on the course. I was a little bit surprised at how many people recognized me on the course. I think I said to Reem it would have been probably close to 70 or 80 people yelling out. So huge thank you if you were one of them. And I'm really hoping that I can continue producing content. And it's so much for me about learning myself and sharing with everyone, what might help other people as well. So yeah, huge thank you to the sponsors of these videos, especially Ketone IQ. Love their hoodie here, and I've actually got another gold coin over here that's a Turkish tradition from one of my friends and athletes that I coach, Bulka. Saw Running and Kaizen, really appreciate you sponsoring this series. And I'm looking forward to sharing more of these videos over the next couple of months as we see how much faster we can get over the marathon.
Yeah, thank you so much for even our own athletes. We had our own little channel going of people spectating and following remotely, so that was really beautiful to kind of go through back and read them all.
Yeah.
And all the comments of everyone tracking us.
Yeah, and our Discord group in the Sweat Elite Coaching Academy, when we got back, I only really noticed it this morning, but there's just this big thread going on with everyone, basically a little cheer zone of people following along for both Reem and myself. So huge thank you to everyone that was involved in that too. But yeah, we'll be back probably next week or the week after with another video all about transitioning between 2 marathons, going all out in two marathons in 4 weeks. And let's see how fast we can go.